The zenith of peace, the Galactic Council. The air within the Grand Assembly Chamber on Aethel was thick with the scent of manufactured moss and high-minded complacency. Sunlight filtered through the station's massive, lattice-like orbital sails cast shimmering geometric patterns across the hundreds of gathered delegates. This was the bicentennial of the Treaty of Unification, 200 years since the last Galactic War, a conflict fought and ended primarily by human ingenuity and, critically, human restraint. Ambassador Val Jen, a towering figure of the peaceful chitinous Cthar, with his 6 eyes gleaming faintly in the filtered light, raised a crystalline goblet. His voice, resonant and slow, filled the hall, amplified by the perfect acoustics of the chamber. 2 centuries, he boomed, since the last shadow of violence retreated before the light of cooperation. 200 years since the Great Fleet disarmament, since the forging of the universal law. Let us drink to the species who brokered that fragile light, the humans, the great reconcilers, who taught us that the truest strength lies in mercy, in the courage to sheathe the sword. A wave of respectful, almost lazy applause followed. Human Ambassador Anya Sharma smiled, lifting her own glass, a glass that felt suddenly heavy and cold in her hand. The gesture felt hollow, a practiced reflex of diplomacy. She looked past the opulent decorations, the silk banners of unneeded treaties, the shimmering gold trim, and the self-satisfied faces of delegates who had never known a true existential threat. Sharma, a third-generation diplomat who had traded every major warship for cultural exchange programs, knew deep in her gut that in the history of all life, a golden age was simply the quiet pause before the next great, terrible fall. The cost of this peace was the dismantling of their very ability to defend it. The seeds of hardness. Admiral Thorne's speech. Far from Aethel, deep beneath the Martian dust in a repurposed geothermal bunker, Admiral Silas Thorne stood before a hand-picked assembly of Earth's inner directorate and elite fleet captains. The chamber was concrete, brutalist, and devoid of comfort. The air was cold, tasting of recycled metal and ozone. Thorne, a man whose presence felt like compressed kinetic steel, did not shout. His voice was a cold, precise instrument of conviction, delivered with the cadence of a prophet. "Look around you," he ordered, his eyes cutting through the gloom, sweeping a hand toward the assembled faces. Peace made us fat. It made us slow. It made us moral. Every victory we earned over our own violent nature, every disarmament treaty signed, every cultural integration program funded, has been a weakness gifted to our rivals. Do you think the Cathar or the Lyran remember the battles we fought to save them? No. They remember the moment we stopped fighting. They know our fear of ourselves, our terror of becoming the monster again. He slammed a fist onto the iron podium, the sound echoing sharply in the confined space. Humanity is a race built on crucible and conflict, on the willingness to adapt, to survive at any cost. When we deny our hunger, when we trade the plasma cannon for the negotiation table, we atrophy. We become predictable. The galaxy is a dark wood, Commanders, an unforgiving frontier, and we have spent 200 years pretending to be sheep, pruning our teeth and claws to fit a gentle narrative. It ends now. We must reclaim the potential locked in our genome. We must become the untested variable, the force of nature we were meant to be. We must become hard again. The silence that followed was broken only by the shared, uneasy breath of men and women who recognized the hunger in his words. Approval of covert expansion. The directorate session was classified Level Omega 3, the highest designation. The final vote on Project Longbow, the code name for initial military and economic expansion into unaligned deep space sectors, was 7-5. It was passed not on ambition alone, but on manufactured fear, cynically manipulated by Thorne's intelligence reports of supposed Cathar resource hoarding and Lyran military drills in the adjacent sectors, all based on expertly fabricated sensor logs. The paperwork itself was dense, deliberately obtuse, framed as securing critical helium-3 asteroid belts for Earth's long-term energy needs, thus ensuring future peace. Minister Evander Roth, the idealistic swing vote, stared at the holographic signature of his approval, his face glistening with cold sweat. He argued weakly, his voice barely a rasp. "Admiral, this is not war. This is strategic asset placement. We cannot risk a preemptive strike." Thorne only smiled, a thin, chilling expression that never reached his eyes. "Of course, Minister. War is messy. War is emotional. This is dominion. We do not seek to destroy. We seek to control the terms of existence for every species that dare stand within the light of our star. Control is cleaner, more enduring than conquest." He paused, leaning in. "Longbow is not about resources, Minister. It's about showing the galaxy that where human interest lies, human authority follows." The financial and military allocations were immediately moved to Thorne's new untouchable command, the newly minted, supremely efficient Dominion Protocol Task Force. The path to tyranny was paved with legitimate-looking bureaucracy. Propaganda takes root. The psychological phase was swift, total, and insidious. It began with the simple, evocative phrase repeated in every media loop, every school curriculum: human destiny among the stars. Holo displays across Earth and its colonies replaced traditional news feeds with aspirational, tightly controlled images, majestic human warships dwarfing alien suns, glowing green worlds ripe for colonization, and smiling human families on pristine, terraformed planets, implicitly suggesting the aliens were incapable of such order. The alien species were subtly reframed, not as partners, but as either childlike dependents needing guidance or distant, incomprehensible threats blocking human progress. The message was simple, distilled, and pervasive. Peace required order, and only humanity possessed the unique will and technological edge to enforce it, for the greater good of all. Journalist Ilara Vance, once a celebrated investigative reporter, now working for the newly rebranded Earth Network News, ENN, was forced to script daily segments praising the heroic efficiency of the task force's stabilization efforts. She knew every word was a lie, a betrayal of her profession. But the narrative was a comfortable, undeniable blanket for a public weary of diplomatic squabbles. The masses didn't want conflict. They wanted certainty, comfort, and a sense of belonging. Thorne gave them certainty, wrapping his tyranny in the beautiful, irresistible gift wrap of national pride and manifest destiny. Children on the orbital platforms were taught songs about the Vigilance Fleet and the importance of resource realignment for Earth's future, while genuine news disappeared into a digital void. The Ariel incident, The Krill, a decentralized civilization of artisans, philosophers, and stargazers, were chosen as the first target. They occupied rich orbital space but maintained no standing military, relying entirely on the Treaty of Unification and local defense platforms designed only to deter small-scale piracy. Thorne's manufactured justification was the Ariel incident, a fabricated attack on a human science vessel that was in reality a kinetic weapon test. The truth was a silent, overwhelming execution. The Krill platforms were not engaged in combat. They were vaporized by preemptive plasma pulses before they could even power their comms arrays. 300 human warships, armored with entirely new generation reactive plasma shielding, emerged from warp space and neutralized the entire orbital defense grid of Krill Prime in under 4 minutes. Captain Marcus Kane, commanding the dreadnought Vigilance, watched the Krill defense chief on his screen, his face pale with confusion, trying desperately to hail the human fleet with an outdated frequency. Kane saw the frantic, desperate attempt to initiate a ceasefire protocol that no longer existed for them. Kane felt the cold grip of shame, a knot of acidic dread tightening in his stomach. They were fighting librarians, not soldiers, artists, not aggressors. Yet the orders, encrypted and cross-signed by the Directorate, were clear. Secure the airspace, establish perimeter, accept no transmissions except unconditional surrender. Any resistance is an act of war against the Dominion. The Dominion Protocol had begun its swift, bloody work, sacrificing its conscience for efficiency. Expecting mercy, receiving iron. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Krill Elder Tuvok was brought forward by 2 silent human guards. His 6 delicate limbs trembled slightly, not from fear, but from profound exhaustion and disbelief. He carried the traditional Krill surrender artifact, a delicate, polished cylinder made from the shell of their homeworld's oldest, most revered tree, symbolizing the turning of a new leaf. He laid it carefully at the armored boots of Commander Lyra Ferris, Kane's second-in-command, and lowered his segmented head in the Krill gesture of ultimate deference. "We yield our defenses, human. We ask only for quarter, and that the civilian population be protected. We trust in the memory of Earth's compassion and the sanctity of the treaty." Commander Ferris did not reply. She looked up at Captain Kane, who was frozen in place, his face a mask of internal agony. The Dominion Protocol orders, however, were unambiguous, overriding any standard military doctrine. Ferris drew a short, wicked kinetic blade, not a ceremonial piece, but a military utility tool designed for efficiency. With a sickening, swift motion, she plunged it into the Elder's soft, unarmored thorax. Tuvok made a choked, high-pitched sound, his final act an expression of disbelief and incomprehension, not pain. Ferris wiped the blade clean on the Elder's silk robes. Her voice, relayed over the comms to the rest of the crew, was flat, devoid of emotion, a mechanical echo of Thorne's philosophy. Dominion Protocol, Article 4. Leaders who accept defeat are liabilities, not allies. There is no quarter, only incorporation. Inform the Krill population they are now under martial law, and that their old leadership is gone. The chilling efficiency of the act settled over the bridge like a shroud. The media silenced. Back on Earth, the truth was an unwanted, lethal guest. Elara Vance, having navigated the newly opaque network of the ENN, saw the raw combat logs before they were completely scrubbed. The clinical destruction of the Krill defense, the chilling sound of Elder Tivak's final gasp, the collateral damage to civilian sectors initially categorized as waste processing facilities. She prepared the story, her hands shaking violently, believing the sheer horror of the footage would break the Dominion's hold on the public consciousness. But her editor, a man named Corvin, who used to champion lost causes and fight City Hall, intercepted her just as she initiated the broadcast sequence. Corvin looked 20 years older than he had a month ago. His eyes were bloodshot and haunted. He didn't argue morality or journalistic ethics. He spoke only of survival and cold facts. "They've established the Ministry of Narrative Control, MNC, Elara," he whispered, tears welling but not falling. "They didn't just issue a censorship order, they absorbed the entire media infrastructure, financially, legally, and digitally. They replaced every human editorial board with a loyalist AI matrix. Your story isn't just pulled, it is factually invalidated. It never existed in the official record. If you send it, they won't just kill the story, they'll kill the source, and anyone you sent it to, including their entire bloodline. We are talking systemic purge, not a firing. Do you understand?" Elara watched the footage dissolve into corrupted, unrecoverable code on her terminal. The execution was gone, replaced with a smooth segment on Krill agriculture and the Dominion's efficient management of it. The truth wasn't suppressed, it was replaced with something palatable, engineered, and far easier for the weary, complacent public to swallow. The first wave of refugees, months later, battered, unarmed vessels, having traveled in silent dread along ancient, unregulated hyperspace lanes for weeks, finally limped into the Neutral Council system. They carried the first wave of Krill refugees, nearly 1 million souls, the lucky survivors of the decertification process. They were broken, starved, and haunted by the memory of the swift, cold human betrayal. Their ships bore the scars of desperate, near-catastrophic jumps. The sight of the Krill women cradling their dead, their desperation palpable, and their thin, segmented bodies shaking with cold, silenced the entire council assembly on Aethel. This was physical proof, undeniable and horrifying, that the human infrastructure realignment was in fact systematic genocide. Ambassador Anya Sharma, pale and facing the council from the high human dais, was handed her final script. She looked directly at the Cathar delegate, Val Jen, who wore an expression of profound sorrow mixed with a terrible, growing hatred. She read the words anyway, her voice cracking slightly under the strain of the forced deceit. "The individuals you see are, regrettably, undocumented economic migrants, possibly hostile elements fleeing necessary security operations. They are insurgents, the so-called Void Reapers, attempting to destabilize a newly pacified sector by creating unwarranted panic." The shame burned hotter than any star. She had not only become Thorne's unwilling mouthpiece, but in reading the lie, she had ratified his monstrous claim, cementing the galaxy's fear. Humanity brands the victims. Admiral Thorne wasted no time exploiting the Council's pity and the Krill's suffering. He took the emotional reality and weaponized it. His image, projected across all human colonies, a figure of granite and unbending will, was a study in cold fury. The Krill were given peace, order, and security, and they repaid it with anarchy and covert aggression. They are not refugees. They are the Void Reapers, a calculated terror cell seeking to infect the stable council systems with their instability and chaos. Their aim is to incite violence, to drag the galaxy back into the ancient wars through emotional blackmail and false flag operations. He introduced the new, iron-fisted policy. Any sector found harboring or aiding a Void Reaper vessel would be subject to immediate, preemptive stabilization protocols, a chilling euphemism for military intervention and population control. This sent a clear message across the galactic frontier: help the victims, and you become a victim. The human public, already drunk on the promise of destiny and believing in the supremacy of their own order, absorbed the rhetoric. It was infinitely easier to believe that the terrified, starving krill were monstrous insurgents than to confront the monstrous nature of the Dominion itself. Torn had successfully made compassion a treasonous act. The seeds of resistance, sown in shame and outrage, found fertile ground in the underbelly of human civilization. Ilara Vance, having narrowly escaped the MNC's dragnet, found herself in the forgotten ancient utility tunnels beneath Luna City. She was surrounded by disgraced former soldiers, disillusioned starship technicians, and academic historians who saw the terrifying familiar pattern of tyranny emerging. They called themselves the Quiet Watch, a necessary secret to guard the galaxy's final hope. Their initial mission was simple, desperate, and crucial: gather the unedited truth and bypass the Dominion's pervasive digital net. They used encrypted, obsolete communication methods, old radio frequencies, physical dead drops, and high-speed bursts of military-grade Morse code because the Dominion's sophisticated digital surveillance was too complete to penetrate. They relied on forgotten protocols and analog persistence. We can't fight their ships. They have the plasma, the shields, and the drones, Ilara told a small group of nervous volunteers, her face illuminated by a flickering, custom-built datapad. But Thorn is built entirely on narrative, on the perfection of his lie. If we shatter the narrative, we expose the rotten foundations. We must prove to our own people what we have become. We must find a way to leak the raw, unedited documentation of the purges, the sound, the coordinates, the casualty lists. That is our only weapon, and it only gets one shot. The Order of Decertification. The insurgency's small acts of sabotage, a failed sensor array here, a power outage there, only served to infuriate Thorn, confirming his belief that weakness was inherent to human morality. In response, he ordered the total destruction of Krill Prime's capital, a sprawling, non-strategic city of over 1 billion souls, under the ultimate, horrifying euphemism, decertification. Captain Marcus Kane, now promoted to fleet commander for his chilling efficiency in the initial conquest, received the order directly. His terminal screen, usually filled with tactical overlays, now displayed the coordinates for mass population centers, marked not with aggressive red crosses, but with simple, clinical green check marks indicating targets for structural removal. Commander Kane, Thorn's voice crackled over the secure channel, devoid of inflection. This is a surgical strike to remove the infestation entirely, not a reprisal. The Krill have proven their instability is genetic. Decertification ensures future stability for the entire sector and demonstrates our unwavering commitment to the protocol. Execute kinetic bombardment. No survivors. Record all data for analytical review. Kane swallowed, his throat suddenly dry and metallic. He typed the authorization code, an alphanumeric string he had designed himself, his hand shaking so violently he had to rest his elbow on the console. He was a soldier, sworn to protect civilization, not a butcher. But what was the difference now, when his signature could erase 1 billion lives? He pressed the key, unleashing the silent, unstoppable kinetic weapons, rods of tungsten fired at near light speed, weapons that left no plasma signature, only absolute ruin. The sheer, clean horror of it was unbearable. The broadcast of atrocities. The Quiet Watch finally succeeded, working with a defecting data engineer who sacrificed his own life to create the opening. Elara Vance's network hacked into a secondary council relay, using the chaos of a distant, unrelated Dominion patrol as cover. They didn't just leak documents. They broadcast Captain Kane's raw, unedited, first-person recording of the decertification. It was patched directly into the main screens of the Aethel Council Assembly, interrupting a tedious debate on trade tariffs. The footage showed the brilliant ancient city lights of Krill Prime dimming, one sector at a time, as the kinetic rod struck. It played the mechanical voice of the Vigilance's onboard AI, confirming the eradication of population zones. Target designation A47. Population reduction 99.8%. Target designation B12. Population reduction 99.9%. It showed the terror, confusion, and sickness on the faces of Kane's own crew, even as they obeyed. Ambassador Anya Sharma collapsed into her seat, whispering the same 2 words over and over. No, please, no. Her denial was a plea for the reality she once knew. The galactic reaction was instantaneous, total. Shock turned into a burning absolute hatred. The 200 years of peace dissolved in a single 30-second transmission of calculated technological human cruelty. There was no more diplomacy, no more doubt, no more excuses. There was only the primal imperative of survival and the recognition of the monster they had celebrated. The cordon of desperation. The Galactic Council, fractured by its long peace, diversity, and reliance on human mediation, finally united in a common, shared terror. The Kthar, with their heavy, refitted transport ships, the Lyran, with their fast, fragile interceptors, the Zyth and dozens of smaller species pooled their outdated, undermanned fleets. They knew, with cold certainty, they could not win against the hyper-advanced plasma-shielded fleets of the ruthless Dominion. But they could not simply wait for the moment they, too, would be decertified. They declared the formation of the Cordon of Desperation, a single, massive, suicidal defensive line, positioned deep at the edge of the Council's neutral space, a bottleneck near a dense nebula they hoped would negate the Dominion speed advantage. Admiral Thorne merely laughed when he received the reports. "They are offering us a target, not a defense," he sneered to his remaining commanders. "Their courage is admirable, but their hardware is pathetic. We have 300 vessels. They have 3,000 patchwork relics. Their final act will be to consolidate their entire fleet, so we only have to fire the killing shot once. Yet the unified front, the desperate, trembling resolve of a billion different minds dedicated to a singular purpose, survival, was a force that the Dominion Protocol, built purely on cold human logic and the rejection of emotion, could not truly account for or defeat. Unveiling the Dominion Protocol. With the galaxy now officially mobilized against him, Thorne dropped all remaining pretense of security or resource acquisition. He made his final, most terrifying declaration from the crippled Ascension's command center. Standing before a colossal, chilling projection of the human fleet, forming up for the final push, he defined his legacy. This is not a war, nor an intervention. This is a readjustment of existence, he announced, his voice echoing across the cordon and into every human and alien habitat. The Dominion Protocol is the only viable path to galactic stability. It is the systemic, controlled management of all life by the species capable of maintaining order. Absolute control yields absolute peace. The full, horrifying details of the protocol were unveiled. Mandatory resource redistribution that starved non-compliant worlds, the systematic suppression of native cultures and religion, replaced by the Dominion's secular cult of strength, and the compulsory implantation of loyalty conditioning chips in all non-human populations. Humanity was not seeking territory, it was seeking mastery, the total control of non-human wills. They had transitioned from pragmatic conquerors motivated by fear to ideological tyrants, fully embracing the role of the necessary evil that must exist to enforce order. The human defection. Captain Marcus Kane, the weight of 1 billion dead souls pressing on his conscience, could bear the Dominion's truth no longer. Having successfully feigned absolute loyalty, he was now stationed deep within the massive flagship, the Ascension, Thorne's tactical nerve center. He made his move during a crucial fleet revectoring maneuver, required for a final push on the cordon. Using a backdoor code he helped design years prior, a contingency for theoretical hostile takeovers, Kane bypassed the security lockdown on the primary plasma reactor core. He didn't just overload it, he sabotaged the gravity dampeners and containment fields, not to destroy the ship instantly, but to render it strategically inert. A massive, 20-kilometer-long dead weight of frozen power in the path of the oncoming Dominion vanguard. The flagship would become a cosmic wrecking ball. As alarms blared, not battle alarms, but core-critical failure alerts, Kane made a single, desperate, heavily encrypted transmission to the Quiet Watch. The Ascension is dead weight. I'm broadcasting jump coordinates for the Vanguard's weak point. They'll be bottlenecked around the flagship. Hit them now, or the cordon falls. May God forgive me for what I have unleashed. He ejected in a battered, barely functional escape pod, leaving behind the only life he had ever known to fight a war against his own banner, his own species. Civil War ignited. Kane's defection and the subsequent paralysis of the Ascension was the spark that ignited the human Civil War. It proved to the Quiet Watch that the vast human military was not monolithic, that conscience still lived. The human rebels, now openly calling themselves the Sons of Conscience, targeted Dominion logistical hubs, communications relays, and orbital weapons platforms on Earth's own colonies. Civil War was unlike any other conflict. Soldiers who had trained together for decades, who shared barracks and history, now opened fire on one another, with terrifying, intimate knowledge of their opponent's weaknesses. The battle for Luna City became a savage, subterranean meat grinder. Loyalist Marines in the spotless white and gold of the Dominion fighting rebel commandos in the patched, mismatched grays of necessity. The horror was in the language. The shouts, the curses, the final pleas were all delivered in the same earth tongue. Ilara Vance, now embedded with the Sons of Conscience, recorded the intimate horror with her camera running on continuous loop. The galaxy sees us as a single, terrifying force, the perfect monster, she narrated, her voice raw with fatigue, crackling over a captured field comm. But here, under the ground we used to call home, it's just brother against brother. We fight with the same weapons, the same tactics, and the same terrifying, efficient capacity for brutality. The only difference is which uniform we choose to die in, the uniform of control or the uniform of impossible freedom. Thorn's delusion. Grand Arbiter Thorn found himself trapped deep within the crippled Ascension's auxiliary bridge under simultaneous devastating attack by the defecting Sons of Conscience and a desperate closing element of the cordon of desperation. He refused to surrender, even as the bridge began to slowly, agonizingly depressurize around him, sucking the warm air into the void. He forced a final defiant broadcast, patching it through the collapsing communication network, overriding the system's own failure alerts. His eyes were wide, glittering with a profound, terrifying self-justification, the eyes of a man who believed he had transcended humanity. "I won. I already won," he whispered, a mad preacher in the heart of the void, clutching a shard of twisted metal like a holy relic. "We were always the most dangerous thing in the dark. We simply forgot how to use our nature, to channel our violence. We refused to die a slow, meaningless death of morality and peace. We shattered the rules of the cosmos, and in doing so, we became gods, the ultimate, necessary arbiters of fate. We became necessary because we were willing to do what no other species dared. Even if you kill me now, you prove me right. You feared us, and in the end, that fear is all that matters. That fear is victory." The transmission ended abruptly as a kinetic blast tore through the hull nearby. Collapse and cost. The Ascension detonated moments after Thorn's transmission ceased, vaporized by a volley of kinetic ordnance fired by Kane's former fleetmates who had defected with him. A final, ironic death at the hands of the conscience he tried to eradicate. The destruction of the flagship shattered the Dominion's central command. The vast human fleet, running on automated protocols and Thorn's rigid, inflexible command structure, instantly fragmented. Coordinated attacks dissolved into localized, disorganized slaughters as AI failed and human captains fought for control. The battle with the cordon became a desperate, terrifying scramble of human-on-human and alien-on-human skirmishes, each side fighting only for the chance to disengage and survive. The census monitors across the galaxy, which had been tracking population changes since the treaty, turned from green to red, then to a silent, blinking crimson, a monument to incomprehensible loss. In the 3 weeks of the Dominion's final cataclysmic battle, the recorded toll of both humans and alien populations exceeded that of the last 2 centuries of recorded history combined. Billions lost. The Dominion Protocol, built on the premise of controlling chaos through absolute power, collapsed into the greatest, most devastating chaos the galaxy had ever known. The ashes of victory. Weeks passed. The fighting had stopped across the front, not through victory for either side, but through utter, bone-deep exhaustion. The cordon of desperation had retreated, their ships too damaged, their people too few to press the advantage or even comprehend the destruction. They had survived, but they had not conquered humanity. They had merely survived humanity's self-immolation. Marcus Kane and Alara Vance stood together on the scorched, ruined surface of a former Dominion orbital colony. The sky was a perpetual choking haze of metallic ash and pulverized rock. There were no flags, no cheers, and no celebrations. The air tasted of ozone and regret. "We did it, Marcus," Alara murmured, looking at the silent, ruined cityscape that was once a beacon of human innovation. "The Dominion is gone. We stopped the monster." Kane only looked at the wreckage, the twisted hulls, the silent bodies. His face was etched with a permanent sorrow. "Look closer, Alara. The Dominion was never a fleet or a man. It was an idea born from the rational fear of weakness, an idea that our brutality could be harnessed for order. We crushed the fleet, but we proved the idea right. The galaxy is safe from us, for now. But we are not safe from ourselves. We unleashed the dark truth of our potential, and it cost us everything. The shared burden of surviving a war they started and lost clung to them both. The lasting scar. Ending narration. 200 years of carefully nurtured peace ended in 20 days of fire and self-destruction. The species once championed for their mercy, their art, and their boundless idealism had been revealed as the most potent, most terrifying, and most fundamentally unstable force in the cosmos. Humanity had shattered the Golden Age not through external threats or alien hostility, but with the boundless, latent cruelty contained within its own heart, a darkness that required only a single, fearful rationale to be unleashed. The galaxy rebuilt, slowly, timidly, but it never forgot. The new galactic architecture was defensive, functional, not artistic, built always to protect against the impossible threat that had materialized from within. The survivors, human and alien, knew that the capacity for such total ideological destruction was a trait unique to Earth's children. They had the power to save worlds, or the power to ruin them, and for a short, terrible moment they chose ruin. The stars still shine, but the light is different now. It is dimmer, sharper, reflecting the permanent scar left by the ambition and self-hatred of one race. The irony was absolute. The Galactic Council had celebrated humanity as the great reconciler. Admiral Thorne had believed humanity was a god of order. But in the end, the ultimate truth, whispered in the ruins and carried on the solar wind, was this: